Well, thank you again for being here. We'll make this the final thing. What I'd like to do here is just engage these guys with any questions we've got. So I've got a stack here of questions from the audience. If something comes up, you can run a card up to me here, or we might, if we get through all of these and we've still got time, we can open it up to the floor. So let's get after it. So for Jason, when starting a business, how do you balance shop talk at home? What's kind of the rule? Have you guys established any sort of rule there, or how do you guys think about that?
We haven't established a rule. We probably need to, especially with our older kids. But you can kind of tell. You can kind of gauge your kids. It's like there's times when you talk about it. Obviously, you live and breathe it. But there's times where you can just feel like your kids are just glazed over. They have a look on their face. I don't think that we've established something where we're like, hey, we're just. But that's a good question, because all these questions are questions that we're asking ourselves. Mm-hmm. I mean, as we've come to a certain point in our business and our kids, I mean, a lot of things are changing in our family as our older kids are, moving out and leaving, starting at this point in our life. So, good question. We haven't done anything with it yet, and we definitely, my wife and I can kind of signal each other across the room, like, let's just talk about something better than business at home. So,
Caleb, I feel like I've heard you talk about this. How do you guys think about that? Is it turned on? Is there a green light? No.
Beautiful. All right. We've ran into this issue at various times, and we just started a rule where we don't talk about work at the table.
Okay. Dinner table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We try to eat together every morning and evening. So just don't talk about it then. And ideally after, until the kids go to bed.
Yeah.
So
I feel like there's I heard this quote recently, I can't remember where, but it was, build the kind of life for yourself that you don't want to take a vacation from. And I think there's something to building a business that you and your family, your spouse, and some of your kids are involved in, that there's I think something that in the modern corporate workplace we're always thinking about, work-life balance, as if those are two different things. And I wonder if you guys have any response to that concept of work-life balance. I mean, it's kind of the same, another way to frame the same question. But is there, Ron, I mean, how do you think about balancing your work activities with your family activities, or however you think about it?
So, prior to owning the business, my work was really disconnected from almost any kind of family conversation, because nobody was involved in it, right? Except for me.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I even understood it, much less.
Yeah.
So, but owning the business, everybody understood it. Everybody knew it. And, we didn't really talk about the daily stuff unless it was interesting. You know, I mean, if it was interesting, we met a really cool person, we had a great, experience, we learned something new. I mean, just something cool. That's what we would kind of just naturally gravitate, because it was more of a lifestyle thing. Yeah. Because we got to the point where at first I was working a lot, and then got to the point where it was kind of to the point where I was basically working 3 or 4 days a week. So it gave us opportunity to wind down, if you will, just settle down. And, we just found ourselves, enjoying talking about interesting things that came up, and interesting people. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the goal. I do think it's hard in a lot of our corporate jobs to involve our spouses in what we're doing. And I would encourage, I mean, this is something I've said to our church a bunch of times, but encourage folks you have to wait until you start a business to bring your spouse in on
your business and in on your business life. I think she actually, God's given you a wife as a helper. And Adam was not good alone, so God gave him a helper. And it wasn't a helper just to be a friend. It was a helper to help him with the task, the work, the mission that God's given him. So your wife, if you're not availing yourself, men, of your wife's counsel, wisdom, input about your business, whether you're an employee or not, there's a lot that you probably should be bringing home, I think. There's the complaining, there's the coming home and just griping about how terrible work is. That's not so helpful. But if you can get your wife engaged in, I'm trying to figure out how to navigate this particular career decision or problem in the business, what do you think? I think a lot of times you'd be surprised at how much, because she knows you better than anybody in the world knows you, right?
I think, too, just one of the biggest things I've had to learn is being sensitive to what's going on in the family. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest problems come, it's not that there's, and we've kind of, depending on the season, we lax off on, we need to not talk about the business.
Yep.
But a lot of times the problem is whenever I'm really excited about something going on, and it's all I think about, and I'm ignoring the fact that, 3 of our kids are sick, or they're having a big thing going on,
right.
Or what does my wife need? What do my kids need?
Right.
They need me to be present and
sure.
with them, and so there is a balance. I mean, but that's just in life, right? I mean, communicating and living with our families, caring for their needs. So it's
that's
not
good.
that we say no work talk is allowed.
Right.
It's more just, we need to be mature enough to care about everything going on.
Yep, that's a good word. Okay. Given the persecution that Christians are facing in the workplace right now with vaccines and regulations around celebrating LGBTQ plus values, do you see a parallel economy emerging or flourishing amongst Christians? Is that a potential development here? Get in there, Ron. It's a tough one.
This would be a slightly different comment, I guess, is that originally I kind of assumed that the government wouldn't let us do Christian things at work, right? I just assumed that's what, you couldn't do it, right? The government said you can't do this stuff.
You've been institutionalized.
You can't pray. You can't have biblical material out. You can't have Christian stuff out at the workplace. You can't have I thought that's what the law said, and I was dead wrong, It doesn't say that. And there's a lot of things you can do as a business owner to promote a Christian environment in your business, right? And I'm almost to the point where I'm thinking the evil one has kind of, he planted that seed in my mind. He's like, if I can just get Ron to believe that, you're not supposed to be able to do this, then he wasn't doing anything, which is what he's trying to do, is just get us to not take action. So owning a business is, a great place to be able to use your God-given and country-given right to, express that you have Christian faith and you are going to run it in a Christian way. You have every right in the world to do that. There's a couple of little gotchas you got to be worried about, but other than that, there's a lot of opportunity, and I think that, there's a lot of kind of things going on out there in the world, but you can, as a business owner, you can create a very strong Christian presence in there. And I think that just goes to this whole notion of how do you think about a business as a ministry? Mm-hmm. And, I think that's a very faith-driven, kingdom-driven, focused thing for us to strive for.
It's good.
Bible talks about us being unevenly yoked, you know, and I feel like that's a big part. It's like that's why you need community of other business owners and those kinds of things, that the people that you're doing business with, your employees, even though, you know, a lot of our employees are not believers, you don't want to get in the situation where you're bending to their thoughts or beliefs or whatever it is. But I feel like that's a very important thing. I mean, even the people that you're in business with, I mean, I think of you, you know, having to work with hospitals or all these things, like at some point in time, because, you know, they may be your business or whatever, they can start controlling.
Right.
You know, we've seen that a lot, even these past couple of years, but anyway.
So you think about who you're hiring and also who you're doing business with as you're applying the not being unequally yoked to those kinds of decisions too. Like you don't want to get to a place to where you've given up so much of the culture of your business or so much of the profit drivers of your business to people who or customers who don't share your values, that now you're in a spot where you're being forced to do something that you don't really want to do. Yeah, I think if you go in with that kind of mindset, and I think the other piece to this question is I really do think we're in a time where, you know, I said in my opening remarks that business ownership, owning productive property is a school for virtue, and this is a time where I think what happens with a lot of people who start businesses is corporations or banks come in and extract the value that has been created by virtuous people and hand it off to companies who are not virtuous. And that's kind of the whole startup, I call it startup porn. You know, this whole subculture. You can get on the internet and just find all these stories of, you know, I hustled and then I exited for $1 bazillion, and you can do it too. You just got to hustle. And it's really propaganda, I think, in a lot of ways, that's put out by these corporations that need virtuous people to go out and take risks and do hard things so that businesses can get created, but they don't have any interest in the virtue that created it. They just want the profit. And so I do think we Christians need to stop spending our time and energy pouring all of our resources into building companies that we hand off and sell to people who don't share our values, or we shouldn't be surprised when all the corporations are evil. So good question. The last thing I'll say about that is this kind of comes back to the anti-fragility thing. Is this is how you build, I think, anti-fragility into a community? Is this? You talked about having an unfair advantage for your kids because you have built a business, and now that business gives you a built-in customer base for new businesses, and it grows. That's what we're trying to build. I think that's what we should be wanting to build. We want a church community that can't be canceled. Right? I mean, it would be awesome if everybody in here was in a position to be able to say, I'm not going to bend my knee to that thing or that thing that HR is telling me I have to do or say or whatever, and be able to say, no, I'm independent. I can do what I want, and I've got this whole network of customers and partners who share the same values I do. So, go pound sand. That's where I think we want to be. And I think that's the thrust of that question. Okay, question about paying yourself a salary with W-2. What are the pros and cons of that? Does anybody have a comment on that? It depends, I guess, on how you're organized. But yeah, go ahead. Yeah, somebody.
So owning a business, eventually, an accountant will probably tell you that you have to have a salary of some sorts. But what they'll also tell you is that there are bonuses, dividends, all that kind of stuff. So what we did that based upon that kind of advice is we set up a nominal W-2 type salary.
Okay.
And then there were quarterly and annual distributions that are taxed completely different and taxed less. And then the other thing that we did is that even though our daughter was, our daughter was into everything, like, every kind of activity known to mankind, dance, piano, all that stuff, and all those people wanted to be paid, right?
Yeah.
And so you can't write off any of that stuff. And so what we did is we, at a very early age, she was on the payroll.
Nice.
Yeah, and so she would get a check and for, working in the store and doing their various and sundry things, and she would get a check and she would go cash it and pay all these various people, right? So there's other ways to do that, but yeah, we took a small W-2 and then took larger distributions.
So if you didn't catch that, there's kind of a subtle, smart, sneaky thing that Ron was doing there, where he was, instead of paying himself and then going and paying a bunch of expenses, he was paying his daughter as an employee, which you were able to count against your income as a business, and so it's a business expense, so it's not taxed income that comes through him and is taxed at the higher income rate. And his daughter's broke, so she's probably in the 0% tax bracket. So all of that money's going to his daughter at 0%, and then she can spend it on her expenses. Anyway, fun things you can do with taxes and things when you own your business.
I can add just one more quick thing that we've learned is, for a business, you want to make sure it's viable. You want to find out how viable is this thing as quick as possible. And one of the most difficult, I think it's always one of the last steps, at least for us, is what's your replacement value? How much does it cost to replace me or Jason or somebody in any role in the company? What's the replacement value? And if you're not paying that, then you don't know if your business is viable.
That's a good point.
And so for us, we needed to get ourselves to, our accountant wanted us to a realistic wage. So because otherwise you could be liable for tax fraud if you are paying yourself a $15,000 salary as a CEO of a multi-million-dollar company, then they're going to see that as tax fraud because you're paying yourself through distributions. So they want to see a somewhat comparable wage. Regardless, though, for our company, we wanted to say, okay, this company is viable and able to replace us at any time. We're not going to have a $50,000 surprise because I'm paying myself $50,000 less than somebody else is going to require.
Right. That makes sense.
Which I'm sure I am. But,
yeah.
But that's the thought.
Yeah.
A lot,
Yeah, it's good.
Don't try to do your business tax on TurboTax. Okay? Find someone who knows what they're doing that you can ask questions to. We were at CPAs that we were at a car wash. I mean, you'd go in there and they would just as fast as, you ask a question and every answer goes over your head, and it was just like trying to get you out of there as fast as you can. Your tax return was $1,500 for a corporate tax return, and we had several of those and whatever, and it's like you didn't have to understand it. As a business, you don't have to understand. You need to understand some of it. You don't have to understand all of it, but at least have someone that does understand it who can bring these things to question, like he's talking about, that you're paying yourself, oh yeah, man, this is a lower tax bracket over here. I'm going to pay myself $20,000 with a W-2, and then I'm going to take all this distribution. Well, no, you're going to get in trouble for that. You need to stop right now and let's adjust your salary to what it should be for someone that's doing your job.
For sure. This question wasn't asked, except that I've had this asked a couple times in the last week or so on this topic, but none of the three of you guys raised money. You guys all more or less bootstrapped it, right? Jason, did you bring in investors to buy stuff?
No, but I regretfully got a loan with the Small Business Administration.
Oh, fun.
along with my bank. So I got my bank portion, and then it was matched by the SBA.
Okay.
And, you know, it sounds good going in, and if you have to do that to start your business, I guess I would say, okay. But, you know, you have prepayment penalties, you have all these fees associated with it. It really ends up coming back, and it's gone now. I mean, I paid the prepayment penalty to get out of my life, but but yeah, it's
So I mean, the lesson there is, you know, the borrower is slave to the lender, and I do think we have to be, as Christians, wise about where we get money to start businesses, and I think it's a pretty good rule to stay away from the government, you know, if you can, right? You know, I mean, our most colleges in America, the majority of the revenue that flows into the college is coming from the government. So most colleges in America, most of the money is not coming from tuition. So who do they care about pleasing and keeping happy, their students or the government, right? And that's you know, the government's insidious in the ways that they offer free money, grants, loan forgiveness, et cetera. But they get strings in there, and they're going to pull those strings at some point. I run a business that I had to raise money to get my business off the ground. I mean, it was kind of bootstrapped, and then they brought me in and had some of my position funded, but I had to go raise money to pay myself and also our employees. When I started the two businesses that failed previously, I didn't raise any money, and looking back on that now, if I could have done it again, I would have raised money. So that I won't get into lots of detail on that, but you don't have to give away. You don't have to go into debt to raise money. You can give people a portion of your company in order to start your business, and you don't have to give up control of your company. And if you're smart and you only raise from people that bring value, that share your values, that bring actual strategic value to your business, that can help you get customers, they can help you figure out problems in the business that you don't understand how to figure out. You've actually now gained a partner who has skin in the game. And there's a lot of people out there, wealthy people, that are going to give their money to the government because they're in a high income, you know, tax bracket, and they'd rather give it to something they believe in. And so there's a lot of money out there to be had if you're willing to go out and do the work to find it and ask for it. And I just, that's one of those lessons that I had to learn because of the nature of the job I was in. I wish I had learned earlier because I think I would have had more success in some of my other ventures. Okay, we're kind of out of time, so I'm going to end it with one last question here. So let's do this one. I think the question that we're getting to here on this one is you know, what if you do feel like you have a lot to lose? You know, what if you? I don't think any of you guys. I mean, Caleb's story was he was dirt poor, and so he felt like maybe he didn't have as much to lose at that moment. But what if you're somebody who's got a pretty expensive lifestyle and a career trajectory that's headed, you know, in a what appears to be a really great place? What is your advice to them? And I'll preview this by saying I've had several friends who have told me about this thing today. Don't go tell a bunch of people to quit their jobs, you know, who have really good jobs. Like we don't need a bunch of people who don't know how to run business, who don't want to run business, to go out and quit their jobs hastily and then be unable to provide for their family. So, what do you guys? What would your advice be to somebody who's interested but feels scared?
So I mean, to an extent, that was me. You know, I had a really good job. I was vice president of a company. I had a wife and a young daughter. We had a big house. We had all the stuff, right? One other little tidbit that I didn't talk about is that I had a heart condition. So I was now going into private insurance, and they said, hey, yeah, we'll cover your wife and daughter, and we're going to cover you except for your heart for a year. And I'm like, so, you talk about, and I to do the deal, I had to mortgage the house.
Yeah.
And take out a huge loan. I mean, I didn't have that kind of money. I mean, it was a lot of money. And so I was like, it was a big deal. But what was interesting about it, and I'm not encouraging somebody to roll the dice. I'm not suggesting that at all. But, you look at all that kind of stuff in a set of bullet points, and you're like, wow, that's a lot, I guess, But honestly, part of it was getting to that moment where it was this overwhelming sense of this is the right thing to do. This is what I'm almost called to do. I'm going to do this before the end of my life here on earth, right? And then when I found the business, I was able to understand it and do enough research where honestly, I was not losing sleep over it.
Yeah.
I honestly did not lose any sleep over it. Some people may look at it as a huge risk, but because of the bullet points of what I was giving up, so to speak, but it made total sense to me. And, so I think if you can get to that point where you've done enough homework and you can see that it makes sense, that might be an indication, but.
Sure.
I would say, we did lose a lot of sleep.
Yeah.
We lost a lot of sleep and a lot of, a lot of family time. We lost a lot of things that we don't get back. Time is something that there's only so much of a day. So, but for us, I would always say, if you have a cush job or you're making a great salary, you have to be willing to go on the adventure of possibly losing, everything. You have to be willing. Am I willing to start all over if this thing doesn't succeed? And that for us, I mean, even though it was scary for my wife, that was just something like, if we have to start all over, can I stay in the building business? Can I start all over and start a building business from scratch? If this thing doesn't pan out, for many of you that work somewhere, you have something that you're really good at, that's marketable, so it's like, can you start all over with another company if your business doesn't succeed? Do you have something to fall back on in some way in that sense? I think a lot of people in this room could answer yes.
Yeah.
I have something to fall back on, but it is. It is a risk. He was saying, don't roll the dice. Make sure you have a viable plan of some business plan that you feel like is successful. Don't just jump off the edge and say, well, I'm just going to try this. I've already quit my job, but I don't really know what I'm going to do yet.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But yeah.
Well, I think I'll just say this is something I wrote in the 4-Hour Work Week. I think is where I learned this. What's that guy's name? Tim. He talks about the fear of the unknown. I think it's in that book, and how a lot of times, given something terrible that like a crappy job, and the unknown, people will choose the devil they know every time over the unknown, because the unknown is just scary. But I think what Jason said is exactly the exercise you just have to be diligent to do. Turn the unknown into the known. What would happen if this thing crashed and burned? Like, what actually would happen? Let's think about it. Let's actually write it down. Okay, no more money, can't pay off the debt. Okay, we have to go into bankruptcy. Okay, we're bankrupt. Then what? We sell the house. Okay, we sell the house. What next? Okay, we go live at our parents' house. Okay, could we live with that? Like, what would happen then? Get a job at Home Depot. Okay, then what? It's like, well, then I'd figure out how to get another job. Okay, like. At that point, it's like, okay, am I willing for that outcome to play itself out? Or in your case, you've got skills, and we've got different skills to fall back on. So I think that's the kind of the devil piece that you were talking about earlier. That sort of, accusation that is whispering in your ear and creating that fear. But I think if you do the diligence to actually allow yourself to walk through the scenario, like a lot of times you find out like, oh, I could live with that. Like I could actually, that's not that bad. It's not too bad. Anyway, you were gonna say something.
No, that's great. For me, it was finding that alternative, right?
Yeah.
So ahead of time, it was just talk. It was just theory. But once I really found something and was able to do the research and put some basic ideas and numbers together, and the more I started getting involved in actually there, it became a whole lot more real and a whole lot better choice, right? Mm-hmm. So ahead of time, it was just theory, and it could have been kind of crazy scary, but I didn't know the other choice, right, in clarity. But once I found the other thing and it became a lot more clear, then it became a much easier thing to think through, with the kind of, process you're talking about.
Yep.
But who's to say that your current job, next week or even in the coming months is not going to ask something of you that you're not willing to do? Yeah. I think that's the other side of, we're entering into times in life and in workplaces, like whoever thought the workplace would become this battlefield of just stuff coming out of nowhere. That's the other side of things. It's like, are you willing to take that risk as well as staying where you are?
Right. Yeah. Well, one of the cool things about business is it forces you to make connections. I think it's really easy to be isolated and just live in your suburban home and not have to make friends with anybody and drive in your little car to your cubicle and sit in the cubicle and then drive back and just be this little atomistic person. When you start to run a business, you have to engage with employees, you have to engage with customers, you have to engage with partners. And what ends up happening is you're forging a network, you're forging relationships. And if you're ethical and you do good work, you can't get canceled. I mean, let's say the government shuts you down. You still have built this network now of all of these people who know you, respect you, love you, and would love to do business with you when you start your next thing. So I think that the current corporate model we have is designed to kind of keep us all isolated and afraid and alone. And I think the vision is that we become more anti-fragile, and that those fears start to go away because I've got this business and that business and this property and these relationships and these connections. So anyway, I think that's a good place maybe to end the conversation. Thank you guys for staying an extra 15 minutes. It's been a lot of fun, and I hope that this will be the beginning of more of these kinds of things. I've got a network of friends who are interested in supporting startups, supporting people who are wanting to go into business. I think there's a lot more out there than we probably know. People like Ron who are actually building things to help people start. So I'm available if anybody has questions or wants to make connections. I'm sure these guys would be willing to talk as well. So thanks for coming, and let's give a hand one more time to our awesome panel.